All right, so thank you again for being here. My name is Cole Jordan. I'm the grants manager for the OSBM, the State Budget Office grants team. I've got the rest of our team on here as well, Christy Doy, Carmen Warren, James Chatham, and Amy Perry. So appreciate them being here. And we are going to talk about sales tax reporting and how to do that with your OSBM administered grant funds. So we'll go ahead and get started. So just a brief overview of what we'll talk about. I'm going to hit on some reminders on fund management because it's something that's important that we always want to make sure everyone's aware of. We'll talk about document maintenance during the monitoring and auditing process, sales tax reporting options, and then we'll talk about how that works on our system, and then we'll go through a demonstration. At the end, we'll do a Q&A, so please pop in any questions that you have at any time. There's a little question mark box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. No question is a bad question, and we find that it's super helpful for other grantees to hear what their fellow grant recipients are struggling with or have questions about. So we find the Q&A portion to be super beneficial for everyone. So please add any questions at any time and we'll get to them at the end. And again, that's just a little question mark box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Okay, so just reminders on the allowable uses of grant funds. They're state funds, and so they have certain rules and regulations outlined by state law. So these funds are to be used for non-sectarian, non-religious purposes only. If you're a nonprofit, you can only use $140,000 towards anyone's individual salary. Any interest earned on your state grant funds, you have to use back on the grant itself. So you don't get to keep the interest that you earn. That has to be spent back on the grant project. Any expenditures you may have for travel, mileage, meals, lodging, and other travel expenses shall be reasonable and supported with documentation. So that includes, travel logs, receipts, anything to back up every dollar that you spend with the state funds. So state rates should be used as guidelines, and international travel is not eligible. Expenditures of grants by either you as a recipient or if you have a subrecipient shall be in accordance with the cost principles outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations, which really just touches on that they need to be reasonable prices. You shouldn't be overpaying an extreme amount for something with state funds. And then as a recipient of grant funds, there is some requirements as far as holding on to that documentation. So you must maintain reports and accounting records that support the expenditures to show that they are allowable expenditures. So those are your invoices, your receipts, your general ledger, making sure that it all aligns. So make sure you've got all of that in one place should we request it. And which goes into my second point, that both you as a recipient and your subrecipient shall make those reports available should we request it, or if the state auditor were to reach out as well. And so as a grant recipient, you are required to make sure your subrecipients are also following all of the same rules and regulations that you as the grant recipient are required to follow. And if you have a subgrantee, we very much advise you to do it on a reimbursement basis. So as far as holding your funds and fund management, there's basically two options to hold your funds appropriately. The overall goal is that you want to be able to account for your funds, your grant funds, and each grant that you have separately from any other grants or any other sources of funds. So one option is having a fund accounting system. So this is an accounting system that supports fund accounting where each source of funds is accounted for separately. Typically, that's our larger organizations that handle many different sources of funds. However, if you're a smaller organization, you're probably going to fall into option 2. And that option is to hold your grant funds in a totally separate bank account. So if you don't have the funds or the infrastructure to pay for an accounting system that can account for the funds separately, then you are going to want to open and make sure you hold those grant funds in a separate bank account. When we talk about submitting anything including the expenses that we're going to talk about with sales tax, it's all reported to your grant smart sheet, which looks like this. The people that receive the initial access are the points of contact and contract signer that we have on file. Very often we'll have just a contract signer as both, so we highly recommend that if you've got someone who's submitting reports that's different from your contract signer, please let us know and we'll update our system to reflect that. But this sheet is view only. So whenever you go to submit anything at all, you have to click on any of these links. It's all the same links that go to a form where you can submit the information. Once you submit the information, it then shows up on your smart sheet. This is the form that pops up when you click on the hyperlink and you choose the submission type you want to submit at that time, and that's what determines what additional questions pop up. So you click on the hyperlink here, this form pops up, and then you choose what you want to submit. Some overall tips on how and what to report for expenses. Expenses should not be aggregated. Individual submissions for each expense. So that would be the opposite of aggregating your expenses, right? You're submitting an individual expense for each one that occurs. Individual submissions should be made by any subrecipients. So if you have a subrecipient, do not list your disbursement to your subrecipient. You should be submitting the actual expenses your subrecipient makes. Employee expenses should be submitted by each pay period, and same goes for your interest earned. That should also be submitted as it is received. For any approved expenses incurred before receiving funds, report the actual date of the expense and the vendor that was paid for the expense, not as a reimbursement to your organization. And as I mentioned before, supporting documentation is required to be maintained. However, it's not submitted during your quarterly reporting process. It's only required to be submitted to OSBM if we request it, or if the state auditor requests it. All right, so now we're going to jump into the sales tax reporting information. So it's going to be different for every organization. And so our system is set up in a certain way that you've got options on how to report it. But the overall message that you want to figure out is if you are eligible for tax exemption, you may not charge sales tax to the grant without requesting a reimbursement from the state. So if you are eligible, being the key word here, for tax exemption, then you cannot use grant funds on sales tax unless you are requesting a reimbursement from the state and using it back on the grant. The alternative is like if you have a lot of people out in the field and they're paying for the sales tax on the front end, and it's through an account with the grant, what you can do is reimburse the sales tax with your general fund. And that way you're essentially reimbursing the grant for the sales tax rather than waiting for the state. So we've got a couple of different images or graphs to show you, like, to figure out kind of what option you should take and how it affects your expenses. So first and foremost, are you eligible for tax exemption? So that's whether or not you have reached out to the Department of Revenue to file for sales tax exemption. If you have the ability to do that, so if you're a nonprofit and you have the ability to do that, then you therefore cannot use grant funds on sales tax. So you fall into this category of eligible for tax exemption, even if your nonprofit is not requesting reimbursements from the state, because from our perspective, we don't know that down the road you don't end up a new staff member starts and then they decide to request that reimbursement. So if you're eligible, then you fall under the yes category. If you are not eligible for sales tax exemption, it's very simple. You just report the full vendor amount, including sales tax paid, and then report 0 into sales tax. That's like very simple. Now, if you are eligible, there are 3 options, and this is going to depend on how your organization handles sales tax. So either you can report the full vendor amount, including the sales tax in the vendor amount field, and report sales tax amount in the sales tax field, which would essentially be you subtracting out the sales tax, but also having it reflect the actual invoice. Number 2 is you report the vendor amount excluding sales tax. So when you submit the expense, you're already pulling out sales tax and not referencing sales tax at all. So you're just putting the subtotal into the vendor total and 0 in sales tax. The third option, and the more time-consuming one, is you report the full vendor amount, including sales tax paid, and 0 in the sales tax, and then you report the reimbursed sales tax once it's received. So the first option is that, maybe you're paying for the sales tax up front, but you're going to reimburse the grant with your general fund. The next option is you've totally separated out how you're paying sales tax already. And then the third option is if you are requesting that reimbursement from the state and going to use it back on the grant funds. All right, so second kind of decision model, are you eligible for tax exemption? If it's no, then again, it's that simple. You're going to report the full vendor total and 0 in sales tax. If it's a yes, if you're eligible for sales tax exemption, then the question becomes, did you use grant funds to pay the whole bill or invoice including sales tax? If yes, then you've got like a further thought process to think about. So like if you already paid sales tax with grant funds, do you have the cash flow that would allow you to cover that sales tax with your general fund? If so, then, so I kind of said it backwards, but if you have an issue providing that cash flow, then you would need to do the reimbursement from the state. If you don't, if you can cover the grant funds with your general funds, then you would report the full vendor amount, including sales tax paid with grant funds, and then report the sales tax amount in the sales tax field. So those are the 2 kind of like decision models to figure out like how does your organization handle it? Do you have the cash flow to cover sales tax if you did already pay for the grant funds? Because that's going to be the easiest. Waiting for the reimbursement from the state may delay your closeout process because you're going to have to wait for that reimbursement from the state. All right, so we find this to be like the best layout of our different options. So you've got your sales tax example here, right? So here's your receipt. You bought 5 books for $20. The subtotal is $100. The sales tax is $8, which brings it to a total of $108. So if you're not eligible for tax exemption, you would put the full total amount into the vendor total amount, and then you'd put 0 on sales tax because I'm not eligible for tax exemption, and therefore I can use state grant funds on sales tax. Now, option 1, 2, and 3 are if you are eligible for sales tax. So option 1, this is kind of our preference because it's very transparent as to how you're handling it and how the receipt actually is reflected in your records. So say that you paid an invoice, it included sales tax, and you use grant funds to pay for it. But you're going to cover those grant funds with your general fund. So you're going to like pay back the grant in the amount of the sales tax. So in that scenario, you would report the full vendor amount, including sales tax, in the vendor amount field, right? So you'd put $108, which is the subtotal plus the sales tax. Then by putting $8 in the sales tax, what our system will do is subtract the $8 so that it only shows in your balance that you have spent $100, right? So by choosing option 1, it matches the receipt completely, but it also tells us that you're covering those $8 with another source of funds, and it's not state funds. Option 2 is another great option. This is for folks that have a finance department that's already separating out this sales tax, or you're separating out it ahead of time and no grant funds are being used on sales tax. In this case, you would only report the subtotal. So vendor total amount would be $100, and then sales tax would be 0, because that $8 of sales tax you've accounted for and it is being covered with other sources of funds. Now, tax exempt option number 3, this is your longer option because it requires you to request that reimbursement from the state, wait for that reimbursement to come back, and then to use that then on the grant funds. So depending on when you're requesting that from the state, whether you do that twice a year or once a year, it can take up to, a year or more to get that back in. And during that time, you'll have to continue to report to OSBM as to what's going on every quarter. So in that scenario, should you choose to do that, you would report the full vendor amount, including sales tax paid with grant funds, and the vendor total amount, and then you would put 0 in sales tax. And the reason you would do that is because when you receive that reimbursement, that is when you would report that sales tax has been returned, and that balance will be added back to your grant total. All right, so a way to kind of ensure that your accounting is correct and that it aligns with what's on your smart sheet, there is a smart sheet summary tab that you can use to compare to your internal records. So you'll have your grant totals. There's a sum of your sales tax if you're entering in sales tax, and then your balance. So on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll show you all this in our demonstration, there's an icon for your summary tab, which pops open this image, and it includes a breakdown of your expenses. So if you're like ready to close out and you see that you've got a balance left over and maybe it's the exact same amount as your sales tax, well, then that's telling us that maybe you didn't cover that sales tax that you paid with the grant funds, and so you'll need to submit additional expenses. All right, so we have a lot of great information on our website. We will be including some shorter videos and recordings of our more topic-specific webinars. So please use our website. I will show that to you right now. We're always adding new information about the process, so it's always helpful to have access to that. So our website is OSBM, so Office State Budget Management.nc.gov. So I'll go to the main page. You can either go down to the popular topics and click on directed grants, or under stewardship services, click on directed grants. If you go to OSBM-administered grants, and then you've got your pre-award information of all of the documents that you filled out then, and then you click on reporting, and here's all the great information about the reporting process, including a PDF to your quarterly performance report, a link to take you down to how to report. So all of these are drop downs, gives you further information. There's even a section on sales tax specifically. And so we'll try to add this video in the future too. So please use all of these helpful tools. We've even got our training links and recordings to our webinars, and like shorter videos should you need a quicker video to remind you how to upload your quarterly performance report. So I'm going to go to Smartsheet now and kind of demonstrate the different options that you have available. And this is your Smartsheet, right? So it's view only. You can't type in here. You can't edit this. The way to submit anything is to click on any of these hyperlinks. They're all the same, and it's going to open up the form that coincides with your Smartsheet. So filling out this form is how you submit any expenses, interest earned, reimbursed sales tax, quarterly performance reports, or your annual Yellow Book audit should your organization be required to submit one. And depending on what you choose is what's going to determine the additional questions that pop up. So I'm going to choose recipient. I'm going to put in my name. And we're going to go back to the PowerPoint to show you the different options. All right, so let's say I am an organization that is not eligible for tax exemption, which is our state community college system and some of the private industries that may have received a grant. So let's say I'm not eligible for tax exemption, so I can use state funds, state grant funds on my expenses. So I'm going to put in the date, the item category, which should match what's on my scope of work. We're going to put in the vendor name, the city, the state, items description, April flowers, vendor total amount. So again, I am not eligible for tax exemption. So I'm going to put my full total, which I guess I should use the book example. But so we'll say I bought 100 flowers or $100 worth of flowers. And the sales tax was $8. And because I can use grant funds on sales tax, I'm going to put the full 108 and I'm going to put 0 in sales tax because I am not eligible for tax exemption. Now, purpose notes, just for your knowledge, this is a helpful place to put context as to how it relates to your scope of work. And what project it supports. So I'm going to hit submit. And should I want to enter in more expenses, I could hit there and continue on. But we're going to go back to the Smartsheet, and I'm going to show you how it affected the balance. I'm going to hit refresh because you do have to refresh the page in order to see what was submitted. So we've got the expense right here. It's listed now. It shows up. Scroll over to the right. I see exactly what I put in. And my vendor total amount was 108. So I'm going to make sure, let's see how this affected my balance. What it should be doing is subtracting $108, right? I spent $108. I put 0 in sales tax. To make math simple, I made the grant amount $100. So our balance is negative $8, right? So I clicked on the summary tab on the right-hand side. I scrolled down to the balance and it's negative 8. So you can't overspend your grant because we give your funds up front. But what I would need to do, which happens quite often, is if you've got a invoice that is being paid for with multiple sources of funds, you should only be listing the actual grants that paid for that invoice. So in this scenario, what I would need to do is reach out to my grant administrator and let them know the item number that needs to be edited and what it needs to be edited to. So I would just email my grant administrator like, hey, item number 1174 needs to be changed. The vendor total should be changed to 100. And we would go in and fix that and your balance would be at 0. All right, so that's the example if we were not eligible for tax exemption. So I'm going to, because I can't type in here, I can't fill this form out. The way to do that is to click on the link to the form, any of the links. And now we are going to do tax exempt option number 1. So this is if I am eligible for tax exemption and I want to make sure the entries I'm putting in match the invoice. But ultimately, I want the system to know that I'm going to cover this sales tax amount with our general fund, or which would be like with future expenses, right? So let's go and show you an example. Math here. So if I do expense, receipt, recipient, 22nd, goods, expenses, I'm gonna keep it all the same. All right, so my receipt said $108, but I'm going to cover that sales tax with our general fund, and I want it to match what my receipt says. So I'm going to hit submit. Now, if I go back to my smart sheet and hit refresh, since my balance was at $100 for my grant, and I put in a vendor total amount for 108. In the previous example, it put me at -8. Now let's see if it does the same now. I clicked on my summary tab, I'm scrolling to the balance. No, it did not, right? So what the system did is it subtracted that $8 I mentioned was included in the sales tax that was included in the vendor total, and it subtracted it out. So that means I've matched what my receipt says, but I've also indicated that this $8 was either not spent with state grant funds, or I'm covering that with additional expenses. So it correctly reflects the 0 balance. All right, so option 2. Option 2 is if you did not pay sales tax with the grant funds. So if you have your accountant or you yourself are separating out the sales tax, making sure the state grant funds are not paying for that, then all you have to do is submit the subtotal, right? So let's go back to our smart sheet. I'm going to click on this hyperlink. It's going to open up my form. Choose expense. Item category. State. April flowers. All right, so I'm only going to submit the subtotal because I paid for the sales tax, or I separated out the sales tax completely separate. So vendor total amount, I am going to put $100 because that was what our subtotal was. Then I'm going to put $0 in sales tax because I did not spend state grant funds on sales tax. And so I'm going to hit submit. And as you can imagine, it's only going to subtract the $100, right? So we've got 100, 100. Let's look at the balance, and we're at 0, which is great. So the last option is option 3. So that's if you had sales tax reported after the reimbursement received. So in this case, if you were going to request a reimbursement from the state, you would put the vendor total amount of $108, knowing that you are requesting that $8 reimbursement. And once you went back in, so let's say, I'll walk through the whole thing. So I'm going to click on my hyperlink again, open up my form so I can fill it out. So I have used the state grant funds on the full invoice, vendor total amount, but I'm going to submit a reimbursement. And so when I get that reimbursement back, I will submit that amount. So right now I'm going to put 0. Otherwise, if you put the sales tax here and the reimbursement, it would essentially add that back to your remaining balance twice. We're going to hit submit. I'm going to go back to and so it went ahead and refreshed it for me. I've got 108. So I'm going to see that my balance is -8, which is right? That is the amount of money that I'm requesting for reimbursement back from the state. So let's say I've submitted my reimbursement. It's gotten back from the Department of Revenue, and it's been a while, which is why we say that this can be the more time-consuming one. But now I've received that reimbursement. I'm ready to put it back into the system. So I'm going to click, instead of expense, I'm going to choose reimburse sales tax. We'll say that the reimbursement came later on in the year, and the amount was $8. So I'm going to hit submit. Now, when I go back, I'm going to hit refresh. All right, we've got our reimbursed sales tax amount. This one shows up, the actual amount shows up pretty far down, so you got to keep scrolling, but it's right there. And then if I scroll down, our balance is at 0. So at that point, I could close out my grant. I've gotten the reimbursement back from the state, and all things are squared away. All right, so that went through all of our options. Hopefully that provided some clarity for everybody, but happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you, by some reason or for some reason, were submitting sales tax one way and changed it, we're always happy to make those corrections for you. Just reach out to your grant administrator and we can talk through it with you and make sure we're all on the same page. But if you have a question, we've got some time. If you want to put it in the Q&A box, which is a question mark box in the bottom right hand corner, you click on it and then put your question in. But otherwise, thank you for attending. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have more questions, please let us know, or if you need to make corrections. But otherwise, we should have some more reporting webinars next month, as well as some more specified issue training. So thanks again. Thanks for the great work you're doing. We're here to help. Let us know how we can do that. And hope you all have a great rest of your day. Doesn't look like we have any questions. So thanks, everybody.